So let's say that you've done your law school, you choose to go outside of Canada, or you're immigrating to Canada and want to practice law here. This is the process that you'll go through. And so everything is done through our websites. We have a series of websites. There's nca.legal, which is our main website, and then an application website, and then a candidate portal where you would go and see what was I assigned. This is where I would register for exams. When I'm finished all of my assigned subjects, this is where I'll go and say, please give me my certificate now because I'm done. And so all of that communication happens through the various websites. You apply, so you apply. Once all of your material is into us, you've paid your fee, we've got all of your documentation, we would then assess your qualifications, give you the results, and then you would either go to law school or go through our exam process and get your certificate and then apply to the Law Society. If you get a Canadian JD, there's almost no LLBs at this point, but if you get a Canadian JD, you apply directly to the Law Society. You don't have to go through the NCA. And some people, very few people would choose to get a foreign degree and a Canadian JD, but it mostly isn't required because we have the NCA process. So those are the steps again. As I said, nca.legal is our website, and you go there and then you say, apply to the NCA, click on the big button there, and then it will take you through the process to apply to the NCA. You'll fill in a lot of different pages of information, but anything that is related to your legal qualifications, your law school transcripts, a certificate of good standing from a licensing body in law, those will need to be submitted to us directly from those issuing institutions. So let's say you end up going to the University of Melbourne. Melbourne would have to send us your transcript. And let's say you end up getting licensed in Queensland. The state licensing body for Queensland would have to send us your certificate of membership, or we would access your the directory of lawyers on their website and verify your licensure from there. You don't need to be licensed to apply to the NCA, but we take it into consideration if you are. The last bullet on that slide talks about the timelines within which we'll assess you. And typically people are getting their files assessed within 6 to 8 weeks after everything has been provided to us. During the pandemic, it was taking much longer because of various lockdowns. For those of you who were in Ontario during the pandemic, you'll know that we had 3 very lengthy lockdowns, and they really slowed down our work here at the NCA. But we're now mostly caught up. There are sometimes a few little hiccups, but we're doing quite well at this point. So these are the things that we take into consideration when we're talking about how we assess your file. So now we've already gone through applying to the NCA, how your file is assessed. And once your file is assessed, you'll be told you need to take demonstrate competency in 5 subjects plus legal research and writing, and you have 5 years to do so. And then what happens at that point is you'll be allowed to write our exams. Unless we tell you that you have to go back to law school, you'll be allowed to write our exams. So on our website already is the schedule for our exams in 2023. We run exams every month except for December, and registration opens and closes opens about 8 weeks before an exam session and closes about 3 to 4 weeks before an exam session. And so you want to make sure, you want to keep, once you're at this point of applying to the NCA, keep a good eye on that schedule and kind of plot out what you're going to do and when you're going to do it. We also have other information on our website about our exams, including, as I mentioned before, the syllabi, so the outlines of the exams, 1 sample exam for each subject, and then some other hints and tips about how to prepare for exams, as well as our rules and regulations around writing the exams and writing them online, complying to those security requirements that we may put in place. If you choose to, or if you have to attend law school, we cannot intervene on your behalf, but we can transfer for free your certified copies of your transcripts to the law schools, or in the case of Ontario, the Ontario Law School Admissions Service. So that's something that we do. If you need that, please don't wait till the last minute. Make sure you give us a few weeks notice that you need it done, because it does take a substantial amount of work on our part to do that. There are a number of law schools in Canada that offer service programs specifically aimed at NCA students, and they're on this list. This doesn't mean that you couldn't go to another law school in Canada, but these are the ones that specifically offer programs or offerings for NCA students. There are some schools in Canada that do not allow NCA students in as special students, but if you had an interest in, let's say, in tax law, there would be LLMs, so Masters of Law in tax law, that you could apply to, but not as an NCA student. But whereas the University of Toronto, Osgoode Hall Law School at York University, and the University of British Columbia have LLMs that are specifically targeted at NCA students. Alberta and Calgary have really interesting programs where you sit in the mainstream JD classes with the mainstream JD students and take some of the subjects that you might be assigned through the NCA. And so that's kind of interesting because you get to meet students who are going through that process. And they get to learn from people who've taken their law degrees outside of Canada. So there's a nice back and forth of learning for folks who go to those two schools. So we've talked about, you apply to the NCA, we assess your file, you write our exams, or you go to law school. And then you're ready, you say, hey, I've completed my assigned requirements. Again, log into the portal, say, hey, I'm ready. I finished all my assigned requirements. And then we will verify that you have. We will issue you your certificate of qualification, and we'll send it to the Law Society in the jurisdiction where you want to practice. Because as I said earlier, the professions are regulated at a provincial and territorial basis. So if you want to work in Ontario, you have to apply to the Law Society of Ontario. Want to work in Nunavut, you apply to the Law Society of Nunavut, etc. And so we would send your certificate of qualification to those law societies. And then you would go through the bar admissions process there. So they're two separate processes. The NCA and bar admissions are two separate processes. Article abridgment means being able to skip some of the articling process. That does happen in some of the provinces, in some of the law societies, but it's only for individuals who are licensed and have experience as a licensed lawyer outside of Canada who would qualify for that.